Welcome back to our place. So today I am doing something that you guys have been asking about for quite a long time, and that is I'm going to show you how I make my pizza dough. So let's watch the quick show intro and we'll get right after it. I've been making this pizza dough for many years, and I don't even need the recipe anymore because I've made it for so long. But there's a few basic ingredients that we do use in this dough, and it is yeast, and I don't use the quick yeast. I use regular yeast, salt, sugar. In this case, it's pure cane sugar, bread flour. I prefer the gold medal one, but this is all I can get locally lately. And we use lard, and the lard that we use here is not the store-bought stuff with all the crap in it to keep it. This is home-rendered lard made right from pig fat. So that's all that's in it. It's pretty simple. And for those that don't know, this is for making a thin and crispy pizza crust. I use a bread maker to just mix the dough. I don't use it for the whole process. I used to do it all by hand with, around here and mix it. And I had flour on the neighbor's house, and I had flour on stores in town, and I had flour 4 miles that direction because
messy.
So I just went to the thrift store and I bought a cheap bread maker, and I don't use it for making bread. I don't use it for anything except simply to mix up my dough. Throw all the ingredients in there, put it in the bread maker, and just let it go. So the first thing we put in is give or take about a tablespoon of yeast. I like to put that in first. You can see about how much I got there. It's a little less than, it's a ballpark, it's kind of ish. And then I put the sugar in next, which is an equal amount. The sugar is what activates the yeast. So again, about an equal amount, if you can see that. And then the next thing I like to do is put in about a cup of hot water to get that kind of emulsifying and doing its thing. It's, I can stick my finger in it. I know there's a specific temperature you're supposed to use, blah, blah, blah. Hot water, that's all I do. I dump that in there and just kind of let it, I let it do its thing. So the next thing then that I'll put in is the flour. I don't put the salt in at the same time as I have the water, the sugar, and the yeast, because salt will kill the activation of the yeast. So I put the salt in last on top of everything else to give that yeast time to do the thing that the yeast does, which is like get all
toil, cauldron, bubble.
So then we throw in about 3 cups of bread flour. Again, it's ish. I know this isn't the proper scoop to be using for bread flour, but it's the one I use because lazy to go digging around for other things. Okay, so that's in there.
Like a goo, it's in there.
Now the next thing I'll do is put this aside so I don't put more of that in. And then I need about a 1/4 cup of this lard. And so this is not like the lard you get at the store. It's a bit thick. So you gotta kind of, you just gotta kind of, kind of just scoop it down in there and pack it in there and stuff. Oh, that smells good, MB. What you cooking? You got a packer down in there. It's like the Green Bay Packers. You got to put a packer down in there, eh? Now the next thing that I do is optional. If you're using the store-bought lard, it's not as necessary. But I prefer, so I got ish, I prefer to melt this lard down before I put it in because this stuff is so thick. It's hard to get it worked into the dough. With the store-bought homogenized, I keep pointing over there because I have a big tub of it that I use for other things. Basically just trying to use it up. But we just did a gallon or so of our own lard here a while. I didn't have anything to do with it. Becky did it. I'm going to put this into a pot and just let it melt it back down into a soft before I add it into the flour. Okay, so get her down in there. I will probably pour the liquid back in here as well to just get the last little goodness out of what happens. Okay, we've got our lard nice and juicy, and I'm not pouring it over the stove so I don't make a mess. I'm just going to pour it over this little thing that we use for compost. So, okay, I'm going to take this over there.
That smell good, MB.
The last thing then is to get that there sodium in there, eh? Oop. A water puddle over here. So I put about a teaspoon, a little more than, of that in there. And we're ready to go ahead and put that in on the bread maker and let it start doing its mixing. This is just an old thrift store bread maker that we have. We keep it in the pantry, and this is where we use it. This dough is a little bit dry. I can already tell that. I'm going to add another 1/8 to 1/4 of a cup of water to it. Okay, we'll see how that goes once this starts fully beating and mixing around. It's pretty thick. I think it's going to need more. I've used up to 1.5 cups of water sometimes. It feels like what happens with this is some days it takes more moisture than other days. I don't know if it's the moisture in the air. I'm not sure. It's just in years and years and years of making this, it's never a consistent amount of water. And sometimes it can, if you just put in like 1.5 cups, sometimes it can turn out really goopy. And so I start slow on the water and add it as it starts mixing to get the consistency I want. But no more than 1.5 cups most of the time. Right now we're at about 1.25 cups. And of course, as a guy, it's one of the things that I struggle the most with is just getting everything put back away when I'm done making the dough, because I tend to leave things out a lot. As you can tell if you've been over on the My Car Shop channel and seen my shop. And if you haven't been there, shameless plug, but go over there and check it out, youtube.com/mycarshop. And you'll see all the tasty goodness of all the automotive projects that I'm working on. So I'm going to take you back over to the bread maker because it's like running solid now, and we'll see the consistency of that dough and see if we need to add more moisture to it. But first I better finish putting this away. Something else while I'm thinking of it, the home rendered lard has to be refrigerated, so we keep that in the refrigerator. We also keep our yeast in the freezer so that it stays active and
It lives longer and prospers.
it's actually not bad. Feel it? Dough is pretty good. I don't think I'm going to add anything more. I am going to punch it down a little bit in here. Bread maker's not real happy with me when I do that, but I do that so that it pulls the little bits of dough and stuff off the bottom of the bread maker. So, all right, this has to go for 45 minutes. Just settings, just so you know. I bought this for $5 at a thrift store, Goodwill, I think is where I got it. And I put it on pizza dough 9, and that's all you need to do. So select down to 9, and then start. And I just let it do its thing. Once it's done doing its thing, I take it over to the oven, and we'll show you what we do then. One thing that I wanted to mention also, and I forgot to mention, is when you're making a thin and crispy crust pizza, moisture is your enemy. So you want enough moisture in that dough to make it pliable and to help the gluten develop. But if you put too much moisture in there, it's really hard to get the crust to be crisp. I feel that the perfect thin and crispy crust is about 1/16 of an inch thick, like a cracker. And when you hold the piece of pizza by its back edge, triangle piece of pizza, that pizza with toppings on it will stay just like that when it's baked. The bottom will be a nice golden brown, and that crust, that pizza, will not droop like this. I've worked for years to get that crust to do that. Even still, I can't consistently make that happen, but I'm getting better at it. So if you're going to try to make a cracker crispy crust thin pizza, you're not going to probably pull it off in the first time. Like I said, I've worked for years and years and years to develop this crust. And it's not so much in the ingredients as it is in the amount of rise time, how many times you knead the dough in between, how fully you let that gluten develop. There's just a lot to it. I'm not going to be able to share all of that with you because it's late today and I'm going to have to rush this process. I normally start this pizza dough at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we will eat the pizza at about 8 o'clock. So that kind of gives you the time frame of I'm working with that dough, letting it raise and collapsing it and raise and collapsing it and working it and kneading it throughout the day to really help that gluten develop. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and this is an experience thing, Becky tends to have some sensitivities to gluten, and it can really bother her. We have found that a lot of it is, there's two things. It's American flour, which is so GMO that it's not healthy for us. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. We've used European flours and those don't bother her as much because they're more genetically pure. The second thing, I find that when you're rushing the gluten process, the gluten isn't fully developed, and I find that in my experience with people who are gluten intolerant, that's more what bothers people. So if you think about all the stuff that's out there in the world, the stuff that you buy in the store, they do not take the time it takes to properly develop that gluten. They force it all to happen. And I think that, in as much as anything, and it's just my opinion, but I think that, as much as anything, is the reason why people react and have so much adversity to gluten. Historically in the world, I don't believe people have had an intolerance to gluten. It's only been more in recent years. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why. We have a container in the freezer of the quick raise yeast that would take this whole process and make it happen a lot faster. But I think, if you're going to do good cooking, it's going to take a lot of time and effort. It's not going to happen quickly. And if it happens quickly, I don't think our bodies are able to deal with it nearly as well. So I just took this out just briefly. It's still got about 40 minutes to go, but I want you to see what this dough is like, okay? You can see that this gluten's not developed. It's not stretching, it's tearing. So this obviously hasn't risen any yet. I'm gonna go put it back in the bread maker, but I wanted you to see what underdeveloped gluten is like. Dough is sexy. So the dough is continuing to raise. I don't want to open the lid on the bread maker yet. I peeked through the top. It's really steamy in there because there's a lot of moisture, but it's about halfway up. So as soon as that fills all the way up, I will go ahead and get it over here on the stove and get it in a bowl. So I got my bowl out that I usually use for the dough. I coat it with a little bit of olive oil. Yes, I've washed my hands. While I was after I got the dough mixes, I did this as soon as I got home from work. I just came immediately because I'm short on time today. So while I was doing all that, I got dishes put away and dishes washed and all of that stuff. So this is a working kitchen, definitely. We use our kitchen really hard. We make everything from scratch. So there's just a constant influx of stuff going on here between Becky and I. So as I said, we coated the bowl with olive oil. It's just to keep the dough from sticking, although the batch of dough today is not as gummy as sometimes, so that shouldn't be as big of an issue. But that'll keep it from sticking, and then we'll take it to the next step after we get it out of the bread maker. After it's raised once, we'll get it in this bowl. We'll punch it down, we'll get it in this bowl, and we'll get it over on the stove where it's warm, and we'll get it wrapped up so that we can accelerate the development of all that gluten. Okay, so our timer is up here for about 45 minutes. We got a nice little rise on it. So let's take that out. We'll take it over to the oven and go to the next step. So we got our bowl ready here, and the bowl is nice and warm, a little bit too hot. The oven is on. I like to let the heat from the oven just kind of waft up over and help the dough raising process. We'll bake the dough at 500. But for right now, I want to get this out of here. I've only got the oven at 350 right now for the raising process, so it comes out nice. We've got a nice lump of dough. So then I just take the dough and I start working it, and I'm checking that gluten again, seeing how it's tearing. It's still tearing pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to have the time today to work this enough to stop it from doing that, which means when we're making the crust itself, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we could put this down on a pan and knead it out. I just find doing this and then rolling it back into a little ball is more than enough, especially for the first raise. So now we're putting it in the bowl for the second raise. Going to keep our distance back here just a little bit so it doesn't bake on one side. It's pretty good amount of heat coming out of there. Then we're going to take our plastic wrap, our cling film. This modern crap just is annoying. With a little cutter, like you can't just use the metal edge because somebody could take that and make a weapon out of it and hurt somebody, I guess. I don't know, something. Okay, so I like to get that nice and tight across there. Okay, then we'll let that raise again. I'm going to take and throw a towel on top of that as well. Whatever I did with that, I don't know. Here it is. Just help hold that heat in a little bit. So there we go. All right, we'll come back and check that in about 20 minutes. Alrighty then, let's see what we got. Oh yeah, she's looking good. Bowl's a little hot on that side, so I'm going to rotate it. We're not quite ready to punch it down yet, but we're definitely getting a nice rise. So we'll let that go for, it's been about 20 minutes. We'll let that go for another 20, and hopefully it's going to be pushing this right up now. So you can't be in a hurry. Well, you can be, but it won't turn out well. Here we are after another 20 minutes. For some reason, the dough is a bit slow raising today, but I'm ready to punch it down again. So, let's see, it's 5:30 right now. We want to eat about 8 o'clock, so I'll probably get one more rise out of this at the speed it's going. But let's see this dough. This is so much better now. Look at how that gluten isn't tearing. So it's got more to go, but it's really starting to get good and stretchy. So the gluten is properly developing. So I'm going to go ahead and work this again. I used to take the time to go through and put this down on the bread mat and really work it out that way. And I ended up feeding a lot more flour in it than I wanted to. And so I just end up doing it like this. Turn it back into a nice ball again. So I basically work it until I see that gluten starting to tear again. Put it back in, lather, rinse, and repeat. What you're wanting to do is try to keep that heat in there, create a little greenhouse so that everything works for our advantage and we get some good raise. So let's put it back to bed again. And obviously I got the oven on. I'm not going to leave the house like this because this is a potential fire hazard. From that oven with that heat wafting up, but you could do this with it or whatever, but I found this works pretty good, and just try to keep it from baking that dough. All right, let's move forward. The next steps will be to once it's done raising, we will roll it all out and everything, and those will be the next steps. We'll lay it out here with flour, but I thought I would take you through the process of how I make the dough. And then in the next video that I do, which could be in a week or 6 months, but we'll do another video picking up from here where once that dough is fully developed, we will roll it out, do the pre-bake, and then go ahead and make the pizza. So just so you know what I do, I take that dough, I roll it all out, make a nice big, like a 16 to 18 inch pizza crust, put parchment paper over the top, flip this over, peel the Teflon mat off of that, put that in the oven, and bake that on that parchment paper for 3 minutes at 500 degrees fan, convection oven, and pull it out, let it completely cool, and then I build my pizza from there. And so while I'm talking here, of course, I'm showing you the pictures of the dough and the crust after it's pre-baked and the pizza in process of being made and the finished product. So we'll take you through that next time. That's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. This is a channel where I just come here to have fun and share stuff with you guys. I have a regular YouTube channel that's growing like crazy called My Car Shop. I do 3 videos a week over there. But this is just a place for me to do random stuff and have fun. People have been asking me about this pizza crust for a long time. I've got another pizza type in development that I'll share with you at some point. I've been working on making the perfect pan pizza. That's for another time. I've only made about 3 of those to this point, so I got a long ways to go. Like I said, this I've been making for years and years and years. All right, that'll do it. We'll catch you on the next one.